Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the gritty, primal science behind the origins of cosmetics. We're zeroing in on the world's first makeup. And trust me, we are about to completely rethink everything we thought we knew about early human behavior and our modern beauty routines. Let's get right into it.
So what if the world's oldest makeup kit was actually, well, a high-tech survival suit? I mean, for thousands of years, our ancestors were covering themselves in these vibrant red ochres and dark manganese. And sure, it's super easy to assume this was just a simple aesthetic choice. But today, we're going to absolutely shatter those preconceived notions about early human vanity and dig into the raw science behind these pigments.
Look, when we think about modern makeup, we almost exclusively associate it with aesthetics, right? Fashion, beauty, self-expression. But if we look at the prehistoric reality, there were no beauty aisles. For our ancestral hominins, this whole practice was about thermoregulation, natural SPF, and vector defense. It wasn't arbitrary fashion at all. It was literally a highly sophisticated, multifunctional shield against some severely harsh environmental elements.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, the oldest makeup kit.
To really wrap our heads around the origins of the world's first makeup, we have to look at the deep time perspective. The systematic use of pigment-rich minerals like ochre is not a recent innovation. Just look at this timeline. It begins a staggering 500,000 years ago with early sourcing at Kathupan in South Africa. Then, we fast forward to 100,000 years ago at Blumbo's Cave, where archaeologists actually found perfectly preserved paint kits. And this practice spans all the way to 12,000 years ago in the underwater caves of La Mina in Mexico, an entire Ice Age mining camp, frozen in time. So we're looking at a behavioral trajectory spanning hundreds of thousands of years across multiple continents.
Which brings us to Section 2, cosmetic armor for survival.
You see, there was this intense biological necessity that drove our ancestors to go to such extreme lengths, over 25%. What does that mean? Well, around 40,000 years ago, during what's known as the Lost Champ geomagnetic excursion, Earth's magnetic field weakened dramatically. Because of that, the amount of ultraviolet radiation blasting the Earth's surface spiked by over 25%. To put that into perspective, that is a sudden, extreme health risk that made unprotected sun exposure incredibly dangerous.
And the threats of this intense UV radiation were no joke. We're talking about deep tissue aging, severe sunburns, systemic immunosuppression, and massive DNA damage. But actually, perhaps the most crucial point here is cutaneous folate destruction. High UV radiation literally destroys vitamin B9 or folate right in your skin. And that is an absolutely critical nutrient for cellular repair, embryonic development, and male fertility. So protecting the skin wasn't about looking good, it was a literal matter of species survival.
So, what did they do? Well, the solution they came up with was brilliant. Red ochre provided a physical barrier. It functioned as an ancient SPF and a really effective bug repellent. As early humans adapted to the open savanna and lost their dense body hair, their skin was entirely exposed. This heavy physical mineral armor effectively replaced that lost hair to defend against that extreme solar radiation and infectious insect vectors like mosquitoes. It was essentially wearable technology.
And hey, we actually have direct evidence of how well this works today. Modern ethnographic studies of the Ovahimba people in Namibia prove that mixing ground ochre with butterfat creates a highly effective sunscreen. Women in these communities require roughly 60 grams of red ochre powder to cover their bodies every few days. This mixture, called ochigis, provides a perceptible degree of UV protection. It gives us a direct, real-world window into exactly how these ancient compounds functioned to keep early humans safe. Moving on to Section 3, prehistoric paint chemists.
Now, the crucial takeaway here is that early hominins were absolutely not primitive scavengers just rubbing colored dirt on themselves, okay? They were highly capable material chemists. They traveled immense distances to source highly specific, high-purity minerals. Just look at this data. At Cavsey Cave, they transported red sedimentary shale from 60 kilometers away. At Deep Kloof Shelter, they hiked over 20 kilometers for high-purity ferruginous siltstone. They were deliberately walking right past lower-quality local rocks sitting right in front of them, simply because they needed the exact chemical and colorimetric properties that those distant minerals provided. And the sheer scale of this is mind-blowing. At Twin Rivers in Zambia, which has deposits dating back hundreds of thousands of years, archaeologists recovered over 70 kilograms of glittering specularite. That's a crystalline form of hematite that gives off this striking metallic reflection.
Finding 70 kilograms of this highly specific mineral proves that aesthetic criteria, like metallic reflectivity and deep color saturation, were deeply, deeply valued alongside the mineral's functional benefits. Now, let's head over to the 100,000-year-old Blombos Cave Workshop and see how this all builds into a complex, standardized chemical paint recipe. Forget a quick trip to the makeup counter. These early hominins were putting in some serious labor. They didn't just smash rocks together. First, they systematically ground the red ochre on dense quartzite slabs. Then, they crushed heated mammal bone to extract the marrow and gelatin fats. Finally, they mixed the powder with charcoal and liquid binders. In some locations, like Sividu Cave, they even used casein from wild lactating bovids. And get this, they stored these highly complex liquid paint mixtures inside large abalone shells and applied them using bone spatulas. I mean, come on, that is amazing! Okay, let's look at Section 4, the first social symbols. This is where we witness a monumental leap in human evolution. It's the point where functional armor actually birthed the very concept of shared culture. Evolutionary anthropologists propose something called the Female Cosmetic Coalitions Model, or FCC. This is a fascinating theory that pigment-based body art, used by synchronized female groups, actually drove the emergence of language, ritual, and symbolic culture. It perfectly explains how a practical survival tool transformed into humanity's very first abstract symbol. The mechanics of this shift are just incredible. First, humans faced an encephalization crisis. Basically, our ancestors' brains were getting larger, which meant infants required a massive amount of energy and food. So to ensure male hunters reliably provisioned them with that food, female groups synchronized their reproductive cycles. They then used red ochre as a ritual veto, essentially a form of sex strike. By painting themselves collectively, they signaled their solidarity to enforce strict reproductive boundaries and ensure they were provided for. And the result of this behavioral shift was profound. The blood-red color of hematite became the first externalized symbol for humanity. The world's first makeup wasn't just physical protection anymore, it was a shared understanding. Through this collective visual signaling, that vibrant color represented ritual power, reproductive status, and social cohesion. This was a complex form of communication, long before the invention of written language.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, a deep time legacy.
As societies continue to grow in complexity, the fundamental role of these mineral pigments evolved right alongside them. Over thousands of years, ochre transitioned from a skin-protecting barrier into a foundational mortuary tool. From the 30,000-year-old Lake Mungo burial in Australia all the way to Neolithic sites in Thailand, red powder remained a universal, sacred stand-in for health, blood, and the life spirit. It was applied directly to the deceased as a highly structured marker of social identity and ancestry. So I leave you with this final thought to ponder. If our ancestors engineered beauty as a literal survival technology, blending chemistry, environmental protection, and social power, what hidden evolutionary functions are driving our modern aesthetic choices today? Because as we've seen, the roots of our modern routines run hundreds of thousands of years deep. So the next time you look at a makeup kit, remember, you are looking at the legacy of human survival. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.